Chester and Portugal Tom Find a Job. A short story by L.D. Roberts. Chester and Portugal Tom are laying in a thin patch of shade made by the two trees that have grown together to form a nice shady bridge in the middle of the street. They're relaxing when Fluffy and her sister Jacaranda come rushing out of the sliding glass door, chase each other around the porch for a while, then spot Chester and Portugal Tom. Portugal Tom says to Chester, "I like the way you pick your ladies. You have excellent taste." Chester says, "Fluffy, she's a sly one. Never showed an ounce of interest in me till her sister Jacaranda decided she wanted me. Then Fluffy was all over me and pretended to care just to annoy her sister." "Ladies are complicated," said Portugal Tom. "Hey, Fluffy's looking at you." Portugal Tom shook his head. "We're buddies. She's one of your ladies." "It's okay. I think you and Fluffy and Jacaranda would get along. I only have 9 ladies because there was no one else to guard and take care of them. Honestly, I could use the help. 9 ladies are exhausting, not to mention very expensive." "Well," says Portugal Tom, "if it would help you out." Chester pointed his nose at the porch. "You, go on then." And Portugal Tom trotted over to the porch. Fluffy looked up at Portugal Tom and sniffed the air. Jacaranda batted her eyelashes. Chester was tired of the whole thing and curled up and took a nap, till Portugal Tom woke him up. Portugal Tom walked quickly away with his tail in the air. "I thought you would spend more time with the girls." Portugal Tom shook his head. "Can't make it too easy for them. They need to know who's boss." "You got that right," said Chester. They were wandering up Main Street. They passed the flower shop, took a few sniffs. Portugal Tom sneezed. Then they passed the butcher shop, but the butcher shooed them away. So they turned the corner and sauntered past the ice cream store. Chester had been there before. He once ate some vanilla ice cream out of a leftover cup, but it was so rich he barfed up a hairball the size of New Jersey and never went back. "What's it like here in the winter?" asked Portugal Tom. "Mostly mild. We have some windy, snowy weather, but I can usually find a warm space when I need one." "I've got an idea," said Portugal Tom as they walked by Charlotte's book nook. Portugal Tom stood outside the huge bay window and looked in. The metal bookshelf was dusty, and one of the display books had fallen over. The paint on the wooden front door was chipped, and the sign that said Charlotte's book nook was just hanging. The outside of the store looked neglected and sad. The two of them waited patiently outside the front door till Melissa, the mail carrier, opened the front door. They scooted in behind her. The store is long and narrow with bookshelves floor to ceiling. The mottled carpeting has seen better decades. It smells of dust and coffee grounds, but it has a well-worn, lived-in feel, like an old pair of jeans. Jameson is sitting on the floor, cross-legged, his back against a bookshelf. He is reading Salem's Lot by Stephen King. He reads a few pages every day in the store. He's afraid if he buys the book and takes it home, the vampires will know where he lives. Chester walks up and, without preamble, jumps into Jameson's lap, curls up, and goes to sleep. Jameson keeps reading and runs his hand over the soft fur. In the meantime, Portugal Tom sniffed in all the corners, investigating every single inch of the store. In the back, he found a bathroom, and next to that, a break room with an old wooden table covered in a plastic tablecloth. He sniffed at a box of tea bags. He didn't know what bergamot was, but it smelled weird, like something had been buried in the ground too long. And he sneezed again. Chester woke up and began rubbing and purring against Jameson, who began scratching him under the chin. Chester loved it, but he acted like he could barely tolerate such a personal affront. He has a cat, after all. Charlotte walked to the back to unload a new delivery of books, and Jameson had fallen asleep with Chester in his lap. There hadn't been a cat in the store for a while. Her mother's cat, Maisie, passed 3 days after Charlotte's mother had died, as though Maisie couldn't live without her. So it had been 6 months since the store had a cat. Charlotte searched around in the cupboard, and then she found it, a box of Frisky's kibble. She found an old bowl and poured some out. It made a crackling sound when it hit the bottom of the bowl, waking Portugal Tom. He loved the sound of crunchies hitting the bowl, so he came running. He weaved around between Charlotte's ankles and thanks, then started munching, spraying tiny little bits of Frisky crumbs all over the linoleum floor. "You are such a good-looking boy," she said, stroking his back. He lifted his head and purred. His silver-gray tail is long and thin. He's pale white with gray fur-covered ears. He has a 5-inch round patch of gray fur on his left side, and all his paws are gray. He's light and lean, and can leap with the grace of a ballet dancer. But his face always has a curious look, as though he's thinking about something important. After he finished his Friskies, he found Chester stretched out in the front window, snoring. He stretched out next to him and laid his head on his neck. Charlotte heard the ping of the bell next to the cash register and hurried over. "Are you the owner?" asked a kind woman wearing a red cardigan sweater. "I am. I inherited the store from my mother." "Well, it's a very nice store, but honey, you really need to wash that front window. Make it sparkle. Make the store inviting. Right now," she swept her hand to indicate the entire store, "everything just looks so dreary." Charlotte looked around and noticed the dust on the bay window, the dead bugs in the corner, and the smears all over the glass. "I was taking care of my mom, so I sort of let the store go," she shrugged, embarrassed. The woman patted Charlotte's hand. "Not easy taking care of a sick mother." She pointed to the window. "But it isn't a problem a sponge and a little elbow grease won't fix. Give yourself some time. It's not easy losing your mother." The woman left, and Charlotte locked the door behind her and began counting out the drawer. $289.47, the best day she had had in a long time. On the way home, she bought a litter box and fresh litter and a water dish with a picture of a smiling cat on the bottom. The next morning, she found Chester sharpening his claws on the rope welcome mat in front of the door. He arched his back and scratched and purred. She opened the door. Both cats looked up at her questioningly. "Yes, you two can live here. You're very good for business." They rushed in. As they were prowling around, Portugal Tom said, "We can tell the ladies we work here now. Let them come to see us." Chester sat and thought about it. That would be a good idea. But he said, "We still have to go and see them once in a while. If we don't, Maxwell or Sampson will try and move in on our territory." Portugal Tom nodded in agreement. In the meantime, Charlotte pulled out a pail and filled it with hot water and put in a squirt of Blue Dawn dishwashing liquid. As it sudsed up, she dragged the pail and the rag to the window. She swirled the rag in the bucket and started washing the window. The rag was an old plaid shirt with half a sleeve. Chester grabbed the sleeve part in his mouth and began to tug. Charlotte kept trying to wipe the window, and Chester kept tugging the rag away. "Stop," she said, laughing. He pulled harder. She put her hand in the bucket and flicked water all over his nose. Chester's eyes went wide. She spritzed him with water? He dropped the rag and ran. She continued washing. Without Chester helping, it was much easier, but it still took all day. She had to wash the enormous window 3 times and then dry it with newspaper to get all the streaks off. Finally finished, she stood on the sidewalk admiring her work. Her shoulders ached and her legs were cramped, but the window sparkled. Chester and Portugal Tom sat inside on the wooden bench and looked out at her. She tickled the glass in front of them, and Portugal Tom tried to lick her fingers through the glass, and she laughed. And then she did it again, and Chester tried to lick her fingers through the glass. What a bunch of crazy cats. That night, at home, she slept through the night for the first time in ages. On Monday morning at 6:33 a.m., Chester stretches out in the bay window, looking out onto Main Street. Portugal Tom is still asleep in the empty spot on the shelf. His favorite place in the store is the shelf next to the Portugal travel guides. He purrs in his sleep, dreaming of Aunt Marlene's codfish pies spiced with cumin. She always made them for him for his birthday. Chester rolls back his head, watching Main Street wake up to a dull gray morning. Anne comes out of the donut shop, pushing the back of her hand across her forehead. She's been rolling out dough, cooking and frosting, making donuts since 3:30 a.m. She needs a quick cigarette before the morning rush. Her white apron is filled with dots of chocolate buttercream and the dull brown of maple glaze. Magenta flecks of raspberry jam dot the left side of her face. Chester on one side of the street and Anne on the other wait patiently until they hear a soft puttering moving toward them slowly and methodically. Chester stands at attention in the window, looks to his left, waiting. Anne smiles. 3 blocks down, you can see it make a slow right turn onto Main. A 1973 Volkswagen Golf, held together with rust, spit, and prayer. The fender has been replaced by a wooden plank. The car trundles down the street. Harold clutches the steering wheel with both hands. Weezer, his 13-year-old lab, leans his head out of the passenger side window. He sniffs the air. The car is moving much too slowly for his ears to flap. So he just contentedly sniffs the air. Passing the bookstore, Weezer nods at Chester, who flips up a paw in greeting. Normally, Chester thinks dogs are dumb and drooly, but there is something about Weezer that's just so goofy that Chester doesn't mind him. Harold continues driving at 5 miles an hour. Technically, he no longer has his license, but if he comes out early and drives slowly, things are okay. He stops in front of Anne, who pulls a mangled maple bar out of her pocket. She pets Weezer, who waits patiently. Good dog, she says, giving him the maple bar, which he devours in one bite. Then she puts a small white bag in his mouth. It contains a chocolate-frosted cinnamon bun and a plain cruller. Gingerly, Weezer drops the bag in Harold's lap. Every morning except Sunday when the bakery is closed, Harold and Weezer make their morning drive and pick up breakfast. Chester has never seen Harold pay. Portugal Tom saunters up slowly, yawning, sits down next to Chester. His sleep system is still off from the time change from Portugal. You missed the dog parade, says Chester. I'll see it tomorrow. It is Monday. The store is closed and they have their run of the place. They stare out of the window together for a while, thinking what needs to be done. There's a copy of Charlotte's Web someone put back in the wrong place that Chester needs to pull off the shelf. So Charlotte will find it, put it back in the children's section. Portugal Tom needs to dust the shelf with his tail, so it's ready for the next shipment of travel guides. The life-size stuffed black Labrador stands at attention at the end of the shelf of the pet section. Chester hates it. It scares him every time he turns the corner. Every time he turns the corner, he thinks that it's real. He can't get used to the fact it's a stuffed animal. He's tired of the whole darn thing. He leaps down and goes over to the stuffed dog, clamps down on the tail, and drags it into the corner. He's hoping Charlotte will think a customer moved it. The door opens. The boys are surprised because it's Monday, but in rushes Charlotte, her arms overflowing with cardboard boxes. And a Walmart brown paper bag full of grease stains hangs off one wrist. Setting the boxes on the floor, she sighs, brushing the bangs out of her eyes. Chester sniffs the box. It smells musty. But he jumps in, finds himself in a cloud of white fabric. He rolls on his back till he feels the round handle of a teacup poke him, and he leaps back out. Portugal Tom pokes around in the brown paper bag, grabbing a hold of a white napkin. Chester grabs the other end, and they wrestle back and forth. In a no-nonsense voice, Charlotte barks, "You two! Stop that right now! My mother embroidered those napkins." Chester and Portugal Tom open their eyes wide, push their ears back in a, "What, me?" look. Charlotte is having none of it. "I am going to set us a nice table for tea, and you two are going to leave it alone and learn some manners." Chester cocks his head and frowns at her. "Manners? Who ever heard of a tomcat with manners?" Chester turns, flicking his tail, knocking over a copy of The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes off the shelf, showing his displeasure. He wanders back to the break room. He is so startled he comes to a dead stop. Sits in utter disbelief. In a billion years, he never expected this. How can this be? How could this happen? Portugal Tom walks up behind him. They stare at each other, shocked beyond meows. Then Portugal Tom throws back his head and lets out a howl, a screaming, desperate howl as if he's being attacked by rabid dogs. Charlotte, hearing his howl, rushes to the back room, afraid that a raccoon has gotten in and attacked the cats. She sees them, both standing by the bowl. The cats turn their heads simultaneously and give Charlotte their worst stink eye. How could she? How could she have abused their good natures and their trust and let them down like this? It is beyond comprehension. It is beyond the bounds of any kind of decency. Charlotte looks at the empty bowl. She forgot to fill it last night, and she starts to laugh. "You're a bit pudgy, Chester. You won't starve from missing just one meal." Chester blinks. What has bewitched Charlotte for her to make such a preposterous statement? She walks over, fills the bowl with food. Chester and Portugal Tom smile, like two castaways shipwrecked on an island, seeing a rescue ship. They don't rush over and eat. They aren't really hungry. They were just devastated that Charlotte let the bowl become empty. Charlotte laughs at them again, then digs around in the storeroom, brings out a folding card table, sets it up in the bay window. She shakes out the embroidered tablecloth and spreads it across the card table. She smooths out all the wrinkles, places matching napkins inside smooth silver engraved napkin rings. She unwraps a saucer, lays it gently on the table, then unwraps a matching teacup and places it gently in a saucer. She does this 4 times until the table is beautifully set. Lastly, she places a glass jar with a silver lid for jam. Charlotte stands, hands on her hips, admiring her work. She turns, looks at Portugal Tom. "All these things belonged to my mother. She loved to have tea parties. I think it's about time the store had a proper English tea party every Friday afternoon." She goes out the front door and comes back with a wooden antique chair with a needle-pointed seat. She brings in 3 more and places one on each side of the card table. Chester jumps onto the chair, and it looks like he's waiting for someone to pour him a cup of tea. Portugal Tom joins him in another chair. Tracy and Caroline, walking to 5th grade, peer in to watch Chester and Portugal Tom. Charlotte picks up the teapot and pantomimes pouring tea into each cup. "It's cats. having a tea party. They point, giggling, and rush off to school, delighted to have a story to tell. Charlotte goes to the back room, starts the electric tea kettle, rinses the pot, and puts 3 teaspoons of mint tea into the pot. She pours in the boiling water, places it on the table. She sits in the middle seat next to the window and pours herself a cup of tea. Melissa from the post office walks by, pushing her cart, and waves. 8-year-old Polly walks by, sniffing and crying. Charlotte beckons her in. Polly, what's wrong? Her face is round and tear-stained. She sniffs, wipes her cheek with the back of her hand.
I have to read out loud today. I'm not good at reading, and I know everyone's gonna laugh at me.
I have just the thing. You sit down. She pours Polly a cup of tea, drops in 3 cubes of sugar, goes back to the store, and comes back with 2 hard copies of The House at Pooh Corner. She hands one to Polly. Polly sits, opens the book. Charlotte sits next to her and opens her book. One for you and one for me. We will read the story together to Chester and Portugal Tom. At the sound of their names, both cats open their eyes really wide and look up. Polly runs her finger over the letters in the book. Shall we start? Polly nods.
Chapter 1, in which a house is built at Pooh's Corner for Eeyore.
Eeyore is a tough one. It's a made-up word, so it's kind of hard to sound out because you've never heard it before. But you did a good job.
One day when Pooh Bear had nothing.
That's pronounced nothing.
Nothing else to do, he thought he would do something, so he... What's this little squiggly thing at the end of the word?
It's a comma. It means pause for a second before you keep on reading.
He thought he would do something.
Good, you paused. Great job.
So he went around to Piglet's house.
Chester looks at Portugal Tom. What's a piglet? Don't know, shrugs Portugal Tom. They don't know what a piglet is, but they are very concerned. What has happened to Piglet?
To see what Piglet was doing. It was still snowing as he stomping.
The word is stamped. It's a tough word, and that's why I'm stamping my feet to help you.
As he stamped over the white forest track, and he... Oh, this word looks hard.
Take your time. Sound it out. Just one syllable at a time.
Expected.
Great, that's exactly perfect.
Pooh expected to find Piglet warming his toes in front of the fire. I'm going to pause now. There's a comma.
Perfect. Good job.
But to Pooh's surprise, he saw the door was open, and the more he looked inside, the more Piglet wasn't there.
Is your teacher Mrs. James?
Yes.
Well, she's a friend of mine. You're doing a great job reading this. I'm going to send her a copy of the recording I made of you reading. I will let her know you were late because you were reading a story at a tea party to some cats.
Thanks.
Good. Come back tomorrow. We'll keep reading the story, and then we can see what happens to Piglet. Polly smiles, jumps off the chair, and runs to school. Do you want to hear the rest of the story? Charlotte asks after Polly is gone. Chester yawns, big and wide. He will not let Charlotte know he is interested in the story. He is a cat, after all. Portugal Tom rolls his eyes and looks bored. Well, I'll just finish chapter 1 and see how we feel after that. Chester lifts a paw up to the teacup. Charlotte fills it up. Chester begins lapping up the tea. He grimaces, so Charlotte puts in 3 cubes of sugar. Chester and Portugal Tom fall asleep curled on the chairs listening as Charlotte reads. All day, people walk by the huge sparkling bay window. They point to the tea table. So many of them rattle the door that Charlotte opens, even though it is Monday. And they wander through the books and magazines and spin the metal carousel filled with hand-painted greeting cards. She sells magazines about Scotland and how to garden, and books by Stephen King and Shakespeare and Jane Austen. And despite the store being closed, she counts out the drawer that night, and it is better than she's done in months. The next morning, tired and grumpy because she didn't have a day off, she opens the store to find Chester and Portugal Tom laying in the bay window, stretched out. Portugal Tom looks up. There is a bunch of people looking in the window, holding up rectangular thingies and pointing at them. What did you do? He asks Chester. I didn't do anything, Chester says. Then he starts thinking. No, he hadn't knocked any books off the shelf. No, he hadn't overturned their water bowl. No, he hadn't eaten any of the greeting cards in the metal spinny thing. He had spun it around about 100 times. Charlotte had told him he couldn't eat any of the greeting cards, but she hadn't told him he couldn't spin the holder around. So why are all these kids out there staring at us and pointing? Asked Portugal Tom. One girl keeps yelling, It's them! It's really them! Chester and Portugal Tom! She keeps jumping up and down and taking pictures. Chester yawns. Oh my God, she says, it's really them. And took 6 pictures all exactly the same. Charlotte comes in and begins to pet both of them at the same time. They are pleased because they have trained her to do this. If there are 2 cats in front of you, you cannot pet one of them. You must pet both of them. You two have to be very good today. It's a special day. Good? Chester was appalled. Why did he have to be good? As if she could read his thoughts, she continued. We are having a birthday party, and all the girls will want to have a selfie taken with you. Plus, you two are both internet stars now. You are on 2 different YouTube channels. She brings up her rectangular thingy and shows them a picture. It's Portugal Tom spread out on the back of a couch with a man reading a book and petting him at the same time. She pushes a button, and look, Chester, there you are. It was a picture of the bay window of the bookshop. And Chester is sitting and licking a paw. I am one mighty fine tomcat, Chester thought, looking at his picture. I photograph very well from all sides. And looky here, says Charlotte. Another picture came up, and it was Portugal Tom and Chester sitting on chairs around the table licking cream out of porcelain teacups. The caption under the picture reads, Come have tea with 2 friends at Charlotte's Book Nook. Chester had no idea what to make of all this, so he jumped out of the window seat and went to go sulk in a back corner. Portugal Tom just cocked his head at Charlotte, who said, You guys will be all right today. Just roll with things. 2 hours later, Charlotte opened the door. 10 girls came rushing in. Their excitement was palpable, as though it had been pent up for years, and it all came tumbling out. Come on, girls, I'll show you to the special place, Charlotte said, waving her hand for them to follow. She led them through the bookstore. When she got to the back of the store, she opened a door, and the girls put their hands up to their mouths and squealed, Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! Chester peeked around the corner. He had never been in this room. He was so stumped, he sat down and looked in amazement. Racks and racks of dresses, and hats with feathers, and gloves that fastened with fancy buttons, and red patent leather shoes with big silver buckles. The walls were filled with bright red boas and beaded necklaces. There was even a black lace parasol. There were bracelets and earrings. It was an explosion of glitter and feathers and rhinestones and baubles. Portugal Tom came up behind Chester. "What is all this?" "I have no idea." The closet and the shelves were crammed to the brim with everything. Each corner had a full-length mirror. There was even a row of handbags and vintage powder compacts. The boys looked at each other. They tried so hard to be good they thought they would burst. They really couldn't help themselves. They rushed over and pulled a feather boa off the wall and started playing with it with their paws. Some of the feathers came off and flew up in the air. A midnight blue feather landed right on Portugal Tom's face, and he sneezed. Chester laughed and laughed. He had to roll over and wave his paws in the air, he was laughing so hard. In the meantime, the girls were having a great time, trying on long frocks with collars and bows and ruffles and beads. They zipped up the dresses and pranced around in front of the full-length mirror. Sandy said to Emery, the birthday girl, "Don't I just look divine?" Emery reached up onto the shelf, pulled down a black hat with a gold feather, and she placed it on her head. "Yes, now we both look absolutely divine." And they fell into a puddle of giggling. Julie was pulling on a pair of white leather gloves that were so long they came all the way up to her shoulder. "You two, would you like to go to the opera with me tonight?" she said, holding up gold opera glasses in front of her face. "And what opera might that be?" asked Emery. "Why, it's the Taylor Swift opera, of course." "Of course it is." Charlotte came up behind them. "Come along now, ladies. It's time for tea." And she led all the very well-dressed girls back to the bay window. There are so many of them that Charlotte has set 2 different tea tables with white embroidered tablecloths and napkins and delicate teacups. In the middle of each table is a glass plate filled with bonbons and lemon squares and tiny cucumber sandwiches with real butter on crustless white bread. "Would you like tea or hot chocolate?" she asks each one of the well-dressed ladies, then fills the cup and hands her a sugar bowl filled with pale-colored yellow and blue sugar cubes and a silver tongue to use. Portugal Tom is watching all this, sitting behind Tina, chewing on the feathers of her long purple boa. "This is so fun," says Emery. "I love to play dress-up." "Me too," says Julie. "I never got to wear a tiara before." After they finish their hot chocolate, Emery begins opening presents, throwing masses of colored paper, long ribbons, and tissue paper all over the floor. Portugal Tom and Chester could not be more delighted. They romp and stomp and roll around and rumble and claw and everything until Portugal Tom is covered in lime green ribbon and pink tassels, and Chester has a red bow stuck to the top of his head. The girls see this, take out their rectangular thingies, and press the side button over and over again. Then they all rush giggling to the back room and put their regular clothes on. About a half hour later, the parents start arriving to pick them up. Each girl pets Chester and Tom on their way out. Emery tells Charlotte before she walks out the door, "This is the best birthday party a girl could ever wish to have." Charlotte smiles at her. "I'm glad you and your friends had such a good time." That night, after Charlotte cleaned up and left for home, Portugal Tom looks at Chester. "What's a birthday?" "I don't know," Chester says, "but I think yours is Tuesday." "Okay, glad we got that settled," said Chester. And then they curled up and went to sleep for the night. I would like to thank Jenny for her wonderful artwork in bringing Chester to life. Without her, Chester would not be what he is. If you enjoyed listening to my story, please hit like and subscribe and leave a comment so my team and I can continue to record these stories for your enjoyment.